Thanksgiving has always been my favorite holiday: warm food, family, laughter. But this year, something was different. It started with my grandmother. Her hands trembled slightly as she passed the mashed potatoes. The turkey, perfectly golden and glistening, had a strange smell, faintly metallic, almost like blood. When I pointed it out, my uncle gave me a sharp look. "Eat up," he said. "We went through a lot of trouble to make this special." No one else seemed to notice anything wrong. They laughed and told stories like every year, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Then, during dessert, my little cousin Sarah started crying. "I don't like it," she said. "I don't want it." My aunt leaned in, her voice unusually firm. "Sarah, you eat what's on your plate. It's tradition." "But it's looking at me," Sarah sobbed. "What did you say?" my grandmother asked, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. Sarah pointed at the pie. "It's got eyes. Right there, under the crust." I looked down at my own slice. I noticed it, a small, dark indentation near the edge of the crust, almost like a pupil. I blinked, and it was gone. My grandmother stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Enough of this nonsense," she said. "Let's finish up and give thanks." But no one moved. My uncle was staring at his plate. My aunt gripped her fork so tightly her knuckles turned white. Sarah had climbed into her mother's lap, sobbing quietly. The room plunged into darkness for a split second before the lights came back on. When they did, my grandmother was standing behind me, her hand on my shoulder. I hadn't even heard her move. "Give thanks," she said softly, leaning close to my ear. Her voice didn't sound like hers anymore, it was deeper, almost growling. I pushed back from the table and stood, knocking over my chair. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking. No one answered. They all just looked at me, with empty expressions. Even Sarah had gone quiet, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. My grandmother stepped closer. "It's tradition," she said, and her voice echoed, not just in the room, but in my head. I ran. Out the door, into the cold night. I didn't look back until I was halfway down the street. When I finally did, the house was dark and silent, the windows empty. But I knew I could never go back. This Thanksgiving, I learned something. Traditions aren't always about family or gratitude. Sometimes, they're about something much darker. Something ancient. Something hungry.